All right, welcome everybody. It is September 13th, 2022, and this is the bi-weekly Cloud Custodian community meeting. A few announcements before we get started. These meetings are public and recorded and put on YouTube, so please be cognizant of that. And as always, the CNCF Code of Conduct is in effect, so please be excellent to each other. If you've joined the meeting here, the Google Meet doesn't preserve our link history, so I'm tossing the URL for the notes there in chat. I put together an agenda, and it's an open agenda, so if there's something that you'd like to see us discuss, feel free to tack it on at the end of the agenda section, and we will get to it. And after we get through the agenda, we do a little PR party and go through some outstanding PRs that people want reviews in or feedback from the community, that kind of stuff. Anybody first timers here that want to say hello? No pressure, but if it's your first time, welcome.
Hey, this is Naohito from Intuit. First time work with Darren and Steven. I will be, it's the first time, so we'll be maybe presenting one PR later. But
Ooh, awesome. All right, welcome. Anyone else want to say hi? All right, so can everybody see the agenda? I'll usually stream whatever it is we're talking about. So governance updates, really no changes here. We just have to sit down and still discuss this. I just keep this here. Tomorrow-ish, expect to see the CNCF announce Cloud Custodian moving into the incubation phase of a project. So tomorrow's going to be a great day. If you've been around for the project for a while, it's taken a long slog to get there. So I'll spoil the surprise, but the rest of the internet will find out tomorrow. So thanks everyone who's been helping making that happen. We're going to do a governance as code day. That's going to be the day before or the week before KubeCon. I'm going to try to have it somewhere in the Washington, D.C. area. The week of October 18th is the day we're going to have to do it. And it will be a hybrid event. So we'll be doing streaming and all that stuff. The CFP actually closed. However, we have a full schedule, but we have enough interest that we might be able to pull off another track. So if any of you out there are still debating whether you should submit a CFP or whatever, the other people on the side of the CFP forum is basically me and Umair. So if there's more content that you want to present for the community, it's always useful because we are recording all of the talks and putting them on YouTube. So if anything, the more talks that we can get in there will probably give us a year's worth of content that we could refer to ourselves in the future. So if you haven't submitted yet, I'd like to encourage you to do that. Any questions on that one? All right. I mentioned this last time. We are testing Slack. I've linked a link to the invite page there. We're using a service that will send someone an invite. They just go to that link and then put in their email address. There's a PR in flight in the Cloud Custodian repo for me to update the website and the readme.md. So if anyone has a chance to look at that and merge it, AJ, theoretically, well, no, not theoretically, because I've seen the change logs. But when you accept that, the doc should just auto rebuild the homepage. I remember, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I want to follow along when it does it this time. This is like the first time I've made a change since you did all that. So we're in Slack right now. I'm kind of posting both in Gitter and Slack, but I suspect most of you will just end up on Slack because that's overwhelmingly what people ask for. So in the meantime, we're not doing a hard cutoff date for Gitter or anything like that. We're just going to kind of point people towards the Slack and then see what happens. So spread the word out there. There's a new repo. Wayne, you want to mention this or you want me to handle it?
No, yeah, sure. So the TF parse repo was published, I think a couple weeks ago. It is there to help support some of the efforts around shift left and validation of Terraform. So the idea is that this wraps the DefSec HCL parser, which has some context-aware Terraform parsing, and just provides us with the output of this is essentially a JSON representation of that Terraform, and provides us with the ability to introspect into there and do neat and interesting things. So,
Okay, your first question comes from Kapil.
I was just going to elaborate on what Wayne was just saying. Like what this is, it's a Golang extension for Python that parses Terraform. And I think we had looked previously at, we have C7 Terraform as a package in tools that will probably deprecate. That's based off of trying to parse Terraform in Python. I think a lot of the realization was that it's really hard to parse Terraform in Python well. Wayne built this out and as using the DevSec library because it actually does modular resolution. It uses, I mean, the only way to parse Terraform because it's idiosyncratic and changes pretty much every Terraform version is to use the canonical library. So that's what this does. And I'll pass the mic back.
Cool. Any other questions on this one? All right, check it out. Thanks, Wayne. Next we have Sunny. You want to do image signing or give us the Kubernetes update? Chef's choice for order.
Sure. Yeah, I'll talk about the signing first. So that just went in for the new ARM64 images that we're building, as well as the existing x86 images. So this is using the cosign experimental features. So if you do a cosign verify Cloud Custodian /C7N with the dev tag, you'll be able to see that it's signed. Not sure if anyone is actively looking to verify image signatures right now, but that is there. And then once we do the latest release, that'll be available on the latest tag as well as the release version tag, so 9.19.0, which should be coming out, I think, later this week. Kapil?
I just wanted to talk through some of our next steps as well on this supply chain security road, which is, I think, something that affects the entire industry. I think, you know, Sunny's done some great work on getting us signed images here, and we, as well as on ARM64, as far as the distribution channels, as far as next works in supply chain security, I think we're looking at both pinning all of our GitHub actions so that as well as, and the purpose of doing that pinning is because right now everything's running in CI is effectively operating some trusted context and reducing that to known versions by git SHAs. And then additionally, looking at doing SBOMs. I'm curious from the people that are here if they even care about SBOMs or if they actually use SBOMs in any way or consume them. Okay. So, future stuff, but we'll do it now.
And then I guess one last bit on CI that isn't here, the AWS functional tests, GitHub Action stuff was merged. It's pending a little bit of internal AWS configuration we got to do to get the IAM role set up, but the functional test should be available inside of GitHub Actions now. Previously, it was running on code build, which wasn't really accessible to the community. The functional tests for AWS are going to be running 6 a.m. Pacific time. I believe it's 6 a.m. Pacific time, or it might be Eastern time, or 3 a.m. Eastern. I forget which one it was, but that's running. The follow-up items for that are GCP and Azure, which both support the federated like OIDC auth flow. There's just a little bit of a hiccup on, it seems like Custodian doesn't like to pick up the credentials with GCP on that flow. But it's just something I gotta hammer away on. And then I can talk briefly about the Kubernetes admission controller stuff. So let me share my screen real quick. There's been a good amount of work done. So right now, if you were to run the server and just run and get on any endpoint, you get your list of policies back. So in this case, we have one that says, for all deployments, we're going to patch the image pull policy to say if not present. And then just run a really quick demo here. So we have a manifest here that has image pull policy equals to always on both of these. And then so if we apply our manifest, we get a warning here. I think the description is not correct, but it says all images must always be pulled. And so then if we run we get our deployments here, we see that on this line, our image pull policy is now if not present. And previously in the manifest, it was always, and same thing here. There's some additional actions here for labeling on an event. So like just like how we have a tag action for the AWS, Azure, GCP providers, you can tag when there's an event. Additionally, there's a auto label users. So it inspects the event, grabs the user that created the event, and then adds it as a label, and you can specify the label key as well. So by default, it's owner contact like we have for the other providers, and that way makes it a lot easier to actually track down who owns what resources in your Kubernetes cluster. There's a whole bunch of other stuff as well. I don't want to take up all the time though. So if anyone has any specific questions or stuff that they want to see, feel free to let me know.
Any questions? And if this is the first seeing the Kubernetes stuff, I added a link to the notes. The pull request is 7697.
And then also, if anyone has any use cases or policy examples they would like to see, definitely let me know. You don't have to write the policy, just give me an idea as to like what problems that you're facing in terms of sort of governance on your cluster. And I'll try to see if I can make a policy out of that.
All right, thanks. Any other questions for Sunny before we move on? All right, the next one, I happened to be hanging out with AJ and Sunny, and we started to talk about changelog and the conventional commits, verbs, and things like that people are putting. And I kind of roundabout went, maybe it's time I should start doing a skeleton for a contributor guide that starts mentioning these things. So I thought I would just mention that it seems pretty obvious, like what our verbs and stuff would be. We just need to define that. Conventional commits doesn't really like enforce anything like per project. It'd be up to us to determine what those are. And so I just saying, hey, I'm going to start to work on this. Does anybody have any feedback, or if anybody has any like style guides that they like, or anything like that? Obviously, you know, I don't think we'd want to you know, make any statements about a thing. We just document what we have now would be a better start. So does anyone have any strong opinions about that? Please let me know either now or at the time. And AJ's tossed a link to conventional commits. That's kind of like the little spec. I don't know if the project has always like done that. I was just kind of following what the person ahead of me did. So I don't know what's up with that, but I'm going to start defining that, and I'll PR it obviously in chunks, so it'll be obvious what I'm working on. Cool. Anything else? Any other agenda items before we get to PRs that need attention, or issues or bugs?
We are targeting a release for this week, right, Kapil? I think you said Wednesday.
Yeah, I think we're trying to get a release out this week. We don't do Fridays, so I think we're still waiting on like one or two last PRs, but So ideally Wednesday, but possibly slipping to Thursday.
You just reminded me, have we talked about release automation in a while? Or is that currently on hold due to Kate's and Docker? I know we wanted the Docker images sorted as part of this as like a dependency.
Yeah. So the work is in all the stuff is sort of like in an effort to get to release automation. So the Docker part was part of it. The functional test is the other part of it. Once the functional tests are done, that's really when we could start banging on it.
Okay.
And getting work done on that. Yeah. So I'm anticipating it might be a thing that's like after Governance as Code Day / KubeCon. Just because there's some prep I need to do for the Kubernetes mode stuff. So.
Gotcha. Cool. Any other questions on release then?
And then Tencent Cloud will be releasing as well this release.
Really? Okay, cool. Yeah. All right, we'll talk about that when we get to 7735. Now, Hito, it's your first meeting, so you get first dibs. Which one's yours?
Okay, I'm actually representing my team. It's not exactly mine, but it's 7696.
Okay, got it. Here we go.
Yeah, so that's for the support for actually description is a little misleading, but basically support it's called pre-query filter for RDS call in the when we use the config pull rule, and pre-query filter defined by the filter that it carries over this describe DB call. As opposed to the post-query filter is when we get the result and then we apply the custodian filter. Two changes made. One is to simply support the pre-query filter attribute, example in the YAML file, so that when we use the RDS resource and want to apply pre-query filter, is there. Will be used. There's a second change will be when we use this for the config rule. The config rule makes 2 API calls, and the first one actually carries the the query filter, the data there, but the second query does not. So the change basically made it to have that. So that's the change is about.
Yeah. So definitely appreciate the PR. I think there's definitely something that seems odd in some of the conversation about using a class-based attribute here that Sonia was highlighting in the running DB instance shouldn't per se be running twice at runtime. So it's a little bit unclear where there's something odd here. We generally would never use class data for this type of instance attribute, and so there feels like something's odd here, and someone wants some maintainers to have to dig into it to try to understand why you're seeing that behavior.
Yeah, I got a ping. I didn't notice this one when it came in, but Steve Gunn, I got a ping from there, and I started to look at it, and I also noticed that the way that it's written right now, it has a filter block, and we're doing name value pairs, and it seemed like it's kind of mirroring what we've done with the EC2 on the EC2 resource, but in that case, it's more key value. So instead of having a filter block with name engine value MariaDB, you'd have a query block and then like engine : MariaDB, just for consistency. So I'll have a look at it too. I know Sunny's already taken a crack at it, but I mean, it seems useful to have. We'll just have to go through it again and try to make sure it's consistent. And the second call does seem weird. I haven't looked in enough to see why that's doing that yet, but worth saying.
Yeah, this PR is pretty much for the when it's used combined with the config rule. If we simply making the RDS, the pre-query filter is not really useful for many cases. It's just that when we have a config rule, and let's say you want to audit the Oracle instances, where your account where you have hundreds of MariaDB in a Postgres, everything will show up in the config, which you don't care about. So that's for that.
Then shouldn't that be done on the config source then?
No, it's not. It's config poll mode, so it's no different than a regular poll mode. So it's not actually event based, and it effectively config is the clock and is recording results, but it's not config as a data set or source.
I think for me, what's confusing is why are there two calls to describe DB instance? And do we know why? I haven't looked at the code to understand. But to me, it just seems weird that there are two calls.
Yeah, I dig down and I couldn't really figure out why there's two calls happening, and there was a choice between like making the change in the config role code itself or resource, and this
I mean, if you just run this on a CLI with dry run mode, you should be able to get the filter behavior should be the exact same. So you can run a PDB or something on it. You don't necessarily have to deploy it as a Lambda to, sorry, let me rephrase. How are you observing the second API call if it's deployed in a Lambda? When you say there's a second API call, how are you observing the second API call? Is that via CloudTrail? Is that via logging?
Oh yeah, I just modify the code, enable more logging and see what's exactly happening behind the scene.
Okay. So init may be called more than once if you're doing, but
yeah, definitely it's calling twice. Yeah.
But init shouldn't be doing API calls. We generally do API calls in process and when we're actually processing. Like the policy instantiation itself is supposed to be a flywheel, but it's not until we're actually processing that we should do any API calls, because you may want to do a policy validation, let's say, as an example, without doing API calls inside of CI. So if you're trying to do this in a init, that's probably the wrong place to do the API call. So it's a little bit, again, some of what you're saying doesn't match up to some of our the common patterns that we use, and just trying to understand that.
Okay.
Yeah, we can take this back with Kalai as well, and then just kind of relook at the way things are being done. If you guys have some juicy comments or feedback, feel free to add it in there, and then we can go from there.
Can we do the top two now? I think those should be easy.
Which one?
The first two. Yeah. So this one, I believe Kapil has already commented on it. At the high level, this is adding support to web filter, I believe, but for file managers, firewall manager. With this, we need the ability to not just do matching on exact string. So I think the question here is, do we want to go full regex support or just glob wildcard matching kind of thing? The implementation here is to use full regex support. Kapil is saying, maybe we can just do glob instead. I think for our use case, it doesn't really matter. Either way works fine. I think it's just a decision we have to make here to move forward. For me, I prefer regex. It's just more flexible and more powerful.
Go with the JWZ quote. You had a problem, now you use regexes, and now you've got two problems. Like it just in the context of what's simpler to read in the policy context. If like complicated regexes are not necessarily the easiest or to read, and so the question is really are all of these cases actually satisfied by just doing a glob? And at least in this context, it did seem that way. So I'm just curious to see what, if there are other use cases that do need the full power of regexes, then definitely, curious to understand that more. Otherwise, I think doing a simpler thing is probably easier for both authors and readers of policies.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'll talk to Kay. But like I said, I think the use case for what we need here, glob matching should be good enough for us. Yeah. Okay. We can modify the code.
Caden kind of gave some examples of the use case we have for it. Is basically what Caden said, I think, in response to Kapil. Scroll down a little bit here.
I think I commented on it too. I mean, it's pretty simple right there.
Okay. So basically, okay, we could do this with glob.
Yeah. It will match more than, it might match more than what we want, because it cannot be as precise as regex, right? Here we just start a wildcard, but it will match with what we need.
Is there any context where it would be more confusing? Like, sorry, you said it might overmatch.
I don't think it's more confusing. It just might more overmatch, but I think it's fine.
Yeah. Basically,
as long as we have enough, I guess, unique characters in there to really distinguish it.
Yeah.
In this example, I think this is good enough here.
Yeah, I mean, you can also directly do the policy name as a literal here if you wanted.
Can you say that again?
You could also do the policy name here as a literal if you wanted, even with glob. Like, if you feel like it might match more, I'm very curious for the use cases where, and I'm sorry, I haven't read this recently, so I see some comments from last day. But if there's a use case where the glob is going to match more, as far as I can tell, how you discriminate between the two firewall WAF policies associated with the firewall would be the same in regex versus glob, and then it's really just a question of not needing to do a leading dot star, so to speak. The regex requires more syntax at the end of the day, as far as I can see it.
So we're kind of exchanging precision for readability if we go glob?
Well, I'm questioning the precision part because it's not clear that there's any precision loss for a use case. And if there is, that's exactly what I'm trying to understand more. Like, is it just because regexes are more flexible, or is there an actual use case where one would be sufficient but not the other?
I don't know. I think we're mostly familiar with regex. We can start looking into glob stuff though. If you have some thoughts on it too, would be appreciated in the comments.
Sounds like it comes down to preferences here. But I do know for a fact that, hey, with regex, things can get gnarly and out of hands, right? So I can see where it's coming from.
Yeah.
All right, your next one is this one?
Yes.
Got you.
I think this one is just a follow-up question of best practice when it comes to recorded data. So here, Sunny was suggesting that, hey, we're just having too many files for the recorded data. And he's suggesting to trimming it down. So I guess this question for the team is it recommended to mess around with recorded data files? For me, I try to not to do that before, simply because, hey, that's the recorded data. I try not to modify test data just so that things will pass. I try to get things as close to, I guess, what's out there as possible.
Yeah, we're not. I mean, the ask here isn't to modify the test, the data so the test will pass. Anytime you have a significant line diff, like here it's like 16,000 lines, most of the data there is redundant. Really, like we do this in other cases, like with the service quota stuff, like that one was like over 100,000 line diff, which we cut down. So I think for the sake of brevity and just usefulness, like we don't need the entire describe call on all the parameters.
To
here.
put that a separate way, Darren, like when you record test data, you're recording your environment. If you have 1,000 EC2 instances and you're only trying to find one and deal with that one, the rest of it's extraneous and pure line noise. So it's not about modifying the test. It's
with this though,
data,
it's not like we're having thousands of instances. This is parameters of database parameter group. So you create one parameter group. By default, it has hundreds of parameters.
Right, all of which are extraneous data per se as well, in the same way.
Yeah, I think the question is basically, is the data relevant to the test that you're making, right? Like if your filter for some reason is like a count filter on the number of parameters, and you're expecting 1,000, I mean, I guess you could maybe start to make a case, but in this case, it's simply a value filter.
And then do you know how the recording data works in terms of file naming? Because you know how it has the suffix like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The way that I understand it is for each API call that it makes, that's the suffix that will then get added to the file.
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Then with that in mind, I don't think we can do what you are suggesting, Sunny, which is collapse it all into one file. I think we're going to have two files here.
You don't necessarily need to collapse into one file. It's just about getting rid of the unnecessary parameters that you don't care about. Because if you only care about one that you're matching in the test, then the other 100s don't matter.
Okay.
Yeah, I probably could have clarified there. It's not a single file for like across all the API calls. Like each time you make the API call, just to try to trim it down to the minimum set.
I think right now it's having pagination, and so that's why there's like a bunch of them. So yeah, I think we can collapse the one that got paginated into one. Yeah. Okay.
Typically for the paginated stuff, the API is looking for the SDK or the client typically looking for a next token.
Yep.
So if the next token is not there, it's not going to try to pull the next file, which should be okay.
Okay.
You can see it looks like the existing tests for RDS parameter groups are like trimmed up in a similar way, so they might be useful inspiration.
Okay.
Actually, on that note, I took a very quick look at this one, and I noticed that there was some manual caching going on and an API calls for describing those parameters where we have a top level resource for RDS cluster parameters. And I didn't know if we could use that like in a resources call so that we didn't have to make those explicit calls and manually handle the caching. Not that I want to jump in and say rewrite your PR after a 30 seconds look at it. I just didn't know, Sunny, does that make any sense like at a glance, or are the manual calls necessary here based on what you saw?
So we have an RDS parameter group resource, but I don't recall if we had the RDS cluster parameter group or.
Yeah, I looked at it. Looks like we do. There's AWS RDS cluster param group is a resource.
AJ, I believe the caching code is in the existing code. I don't think it's something new that PR introduced.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that it is. I bring it up. That's why I haven't commented yet because I didn't. It was very likely that I just hadn't looked deeply enough yet. But we're on a call, so may as well talk about it.
All right. Anything else on this one?
No. Okay.
All right. Whose is this? It got merged. Why did we boom this?
I think we're just waiting on the. I'm not sure. It is a bug.
All right. Well, thanks, Kevin. I've forgotten why we wanted to do this one. This one's yours, Sonny. Valueless filter. Yeah.
Oh, right.
I remember this one.
Did we talk about this last meeting? Probably not, right? 'Cause that was 2 weeks ago. This addresses a common ask that we've had in the issues for a long time, which is to be able to do a multi-attribute match over a list of objects. For a more concrete way to say that, people that ask, can I do regex over list? Or can I, in this case, AJ gave an example where you wanted to match on multiple attributes on the dictionary. Before, you would have to do some weird James path expression, but now with the bottom example, it's much more legible and clear what the intent is without having to do the James path expression in your head. There are some questions on naming. I think right now it's item list instead of value list, or list item. I forget which one. But if anyone has any concerns or questions or whatever, feel free to drop a comment in the PR.
All right. 10-cent Cloud. Kapil, you want to give us a TLDR on this one?
Tencent's been contributing. I think we still need a README just to, and it's mostly just the base provider, and I think some VMs, but it's been making progress, and all that's looking well. So we'll be doing that as part of this. That just provider as part of this release. It's still pretty basic. It's mostly just poll-based evaluation. Architecturally, we can do serverless API response in this provider as well. Whether or not that's in scope, they would have to defer to what that team's contributing, like where they want to go with their contributions.
Cool. All right. Any other questions on this one? All right. 2 more. Output to try to determine bucket region without a client. This looks like yours, AJ.
Yeah, this addresses an issue that came up in the last release where we need to be able to determine a bucket region and specify that for our output buckets. And in certain cases, cross-account, cross-region stuff, that account, no matter how many permissions you try to add, that action is going to get denied. So here we took some inspiration from comments and other issues and try to pull that, determine that region through HTTP headers. And then we still fall back to get bucket location calls, but that should prevent some issues with writing to S3 across regions, across accounts. And we may try to use this functionality elsewhere just because of other, and I know Pratyush isn't on the call, but he mentioned that there is some confusion sometimes working with S3 because being a global namespace, but needing to do some operations within the region where the bucket lives, we run into some weird issues. So this may be helpful in other places.
All right. Any questions on this one? And this last one, I just wanted to point out, this is where you can follow the Kubernetes provider work here. And I linked to the PR in the show notes. And that's all that we have for our agenda. Does anybody have anything they like to give to the group, or are we giving people time back?
Quick question. So for just coming back to that WAF v2 support for regex or glob filtering. So we have that for that'll support CloudFormation and also ALBs. We want to also add support for AppSync and API Gateway, so like the REST stage resource. We did notice an issue with the rest stage resource, the way it's showing up in config, like basically the way the stage ARN is getting generated or something. So we'll have something else in for that. But has there been any, have you guys seen anything for like AppSync, like as far as people requesting or wanting that, or is that something that you guys have looked at or anything? We're probably going to be trying to add that resource here in the next couple weeks.
It hasn't come up. I think App Runner was something that was on the list that I'd seen, but I don't recall AppSync specifically.
Okay.
But we're happy to, for a resource on that. Sounds great. And I don't believe App Runner has WAF-V2 support either, but I know adding a resource for AppSync sounds great.
Okay, awesome. And then the other thing was on the, sorry to circle back on those PRs, but the RDS cluster one that's kind of checking for TLS. I think we also want to make sure that DocumentDB and Neptune are supported. I believe
That
it's
should just happen automatically.
Okay.
I mean, they're just a different type of engine, and from a RDS cluster perspective, they
should be in the
they do have their own
parameter.
APIs, but they all show up underneath that same
Okay,
RDS cluster API.
Okay, cool. I don't think that's something we fully tested, but okay, cool. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, basically we're wanting to consolidate and kind of, just use RDS cluster instead of having multiple policies for different engines. Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you.
You may still need to do different policies for the by engine type, just because the parameters are maybe different for each one. But
we're hoping we can just have.
You can do a one big block of orders around it, yes, as well.
Okay, sweet. Thank you.
All right. Anything else? All right. Awesome. We'll see everyone in 2 weeks, and thanks for attending.
Thanks,
15
everybody.
minutes back. All right. Getting the groove.
Cheers.
Later.